Okay, so before we get started on Photoshop Elements, let's set it up for maximum performance. It's really easy and takes about a minute to do it. First thing we do is we come up here to Edit, all the way down to Color Settings, and then we choose Always Optimize for Printing. This puts you in the Adobe RGB color space, which has got a lot more colors to use. So we click out there, OK. Move back along again to Edit, all the way down to the bottom to Preferences, and across here to Performance. We click on Performance. You're probably sitting here around about 60-70%. Just move it up all the way to the end, 100%. Gives you some extra available RAM there. And if you're using an external hard drive, which most people do these days, you can lock your external hard drive here to your scratch disk, which gives you more space as well. At this point, I'd also suggest to add some extra memory to your computer. A couple extra gigs of memory makes a massive difference to performance. So we click out of here and OK. Now we want to make a bit of extra room to move in here. So the first thing we're going to do is get rid of this. This is called your project bin. So we come up here to Window, down to Project Bin, and we just click there. There we go, a lot more space to use already. Next thing we want to do, if we're not using it at the time, is to get rid of this. This is called your panel bin. So we click down here to Panel Bin, and there we go, a lot more space to use. Now it's a good time to start to learn about your shortcuts. If you click under here at Edit, you'll see your undo there, Control Z. That's one of your shortcuts. Another shortcut which is really useful is your zooming. So we'll look here, to do your zooming, you're going to use your Control plus or Control minus to come out. If you're on a Mac, it's Command plus or Command minus. So start to memorize the different shortcuts, and you see them under each different section. Cut, Control X, Revert, Redo. These are two big ones you're going to be using, Control Z and Control Y. So let's get started, shall we? This is probably the most important lesson in the whole course, learning to process files in Adobe's Camera Raw. I spend about 80% of my time using this tool, and it's a great time saver. You'll probably think this doesn't apply to you if you only shoot in JPEG, but one of the biggest secrets of Adobe Photoshop Elements is that you can open a JPEG in Camera Raw and process it exactly the same as a RAW file. If you're not shooting in RAW, I strongly suggest you start to, or at least shooting JPEG and RAW. You'll have far greater control. So let's look at using Camera Raw. Firstly, we'll open up a RAW file. I'll just escape out of here. So we come down here and we do Open. Here's my RAW file. So I just double click on the RAW file. It takes a bit of time to open up because they are such large files. So there we are. I've opened quickly and easily a RAW file in Camera Raw. I'll just escape out of here again by using your escape button. And I come down here. Now to open a JPEG, instead of using Open, I use Open As. So I do Open As. I find my JPEG and I come down here, and instead of doing Open As a PSD file, I do Open As Camera Raw. So there we go, and I click on the JPEG, opening as a Camera Raw file, and if you see here, it's an actual JPEG here that's been opened up in the Camera Raw, in Adobe's Camera Raw. So let's move on and find out how we process that image. Okay. So looking at Adobe Camera Raw, it does look a bit daunting at first, but the easiest way to do it is to just simply go from top to bottom. So we're going to start off with white balance. There's three different ways you can use your white balance or set your white balance. First way is to click on here with your white balance tool, find an area that should be light grey, which is here above the model's head, and presto, that looks pretty good. That's pretty much exactly how it was when I shot the photo actually. So that looks pretty good there. I'll just bring that back to more or less where it was. Second way you can use is your presets. If you come through here, you've got custom, flash, looks okay, tungsten, looks very blue, Cloudy, looks a bit too red there. As shot, that looks about the best for me as well. So your second way there is to use your presets. I'll just reset that back again to my OS 4 there. And last but not least, and it is actually the best way to do it once you get the hang of it, is to use your temperature slider. There's two temperature sliders here, but I generally only use the top one. So if our picture at the moment here is too orangey, or too warm as we like to say, I'll cool it off by moving the slider to the left hand side here and adding some blue to it. So there we go. Now if your picture is actually too cold or too cool or too blue, we simply push it to the right hand side here and warm it up. Now remember that your white balance is subjective. It's how you want the photograph to look. There is no right or wrong. That looks pretty good to me. There we go, that's looking pretty good. Next one along is our exposure level, or pretty much as we call it, setting the white point. So first thing we do is we set our clipping warning. So on the right hand side you've got your highlight clipping warning, so I'm going to click that, and we can see through here we've got some highlight clipping through here. This is where the photograph's been blowing out, and then you click on the left hand side here, which is your shadow clipping warning, and I'll just push this up. You can see some clipping coming through the hair here. Now these two areas here mean that when you go and actually print this photograph, it won't print correctly through these areas. These are your highlight and shadow warnings, meaning there's a problem there. So let's set our exposure level, which is basically setting your white point. What you can do when you've got your finger on the exposure level, you can press the Alt key and you can see through where your actually white point starts. I'll just take my finger off again, and we can see it's these areas here. So you want to try and get this so it's not blowing out, but really quite. I'll just put my Alt key, bring that back a little bit there. That looks about right. So that's a white point. Don't worry about these areas here, because we're going to actually recover those using the recovery slider. So I've set my white point there. We move along to the recovery slider. I push that out. As I push that out, you can see it's starting to recover the highlight areas there which are blown out. Some areas there that you'll never actually recover, but that's looking pretty good. So our white point's been set, we've actually recovered it, and we move down to the next level here, which is your fill light. Now as I increase the fill light, have a look through here on these. Actually, I'll just back that off a little bit through here, and we increase the fill light, and as I'm increasing it, the shadow highlights are disappearing as well, and the photograph is looking pretty good there. Just increase that a little bit through here. That's looking great. Now your black is now setting your black level is almost exactly the same as setting your white level. You can actually press on the Alt key, and you can start to see where your blacks start to increase. If you look at it, starts here in the hair. So I'm going to push that until I start to get the highlight clipping. Around about there. See that? You can see a little bit of clipping through the hair, but besides that, it's looking pretty good. So you've set your white and your black point, and that's looking great. Now we move on to the brightness slider. Now the brightness slider is really good to set your overall brightness of the photograph, and it doesn't generally affect your shadow clipping or your highlight clipping. So I'll just push this up a little bit there, brighten the photo a little bit. That's looking pretty good. No extra clipping, which is great. Next one along is our contrast. Now our contrast is explained pretty easily by looking at the difference between a cloudy day and a sunny day. I'm just going to increase this. A sunny day has lots of contrast and you get strong shadows and highlights. On a cloudy day, you get an all over even light. A sunny day is called hard light and a cloudy day is called soft light. When you increase the contrast, you're increasing exactly that, the contrast between the shadows and the highlights. You'll find this adds punch to photos taken in soft light, and you can reduce the contrast in harsh light. Now as we took this in a soft light, I'm going to increase this just to increase the contrast between the shadows and the highlights. There we go. Back that off a little bit. That's looking pretty good. So I've increased the contrast, which adds a little bit of extra punch to the photo as well. Next one we've got along here is the clarity slider. Now the clarity slider is exactly that. It has a nice sharpening effect without making your image look overly sharpened. Its name really is self-descriptive, clarity. It increases the contrast locally. I'll just increase that. That's looking pretty good. It's starting to jump out at us. What you actually can do with this clarity slider is to back it right off. So I'm going to back it right off here. And you get that really nice soft, like sort of a Vaseline on the lens type look through here. It's generally pretty good if you're using this with sort of older people or people with wrinkles. Our model's quite young and looking pretty good, so I'm actually going to bump that up so we get a really nice looking shot through here. I'm going to bump the clarity up to about there, 510. That's looking great. Next one along is Vibrant slider, which is my favorite. Vibrant adds that really nice punch and saturated colors through the photograph. I'll just push this up. I generally push it as far as I can go without the photograph looking too artificial. So that's looking great. It's really starting to bring some nice deep colors through the photograph. Last but not least, and to me is actually the least, is your saturation slider. I find that using this, unless I'm using it for some special effect, I find it looks very artificial. Have a look at this. I'll just push it up a little bit, and our model's starting to look like she's been on a fake suntan bed for about 20 years or something. So it does look really artificial. So I'm just going to bring that back and just back to zero. Easiest way to go back to zero is just double click. There you go, back to zero. So we're looking pretty good there. So let's move along to sharpening. So next step we want to do is to sharpen our photograph. So to do that, you come up here to details. Just click on details through here. This brings you into the sharpening section. We'll do exactly the same thing as we did before, as we go from top to bottom. So the first thing we need to do is to increase our image up to 100% so we can see the sharpening. So just down the left hand side, 100%. I'll just use my hand to bring it along here to show the face. We'll just get a little bit there. We get the lips and the mouth. There we go. That's looking pretty good. Now, as we start off, now with portraits, you don't want to over sharpen them as opposed to landscapes. Landscapes, you want to sharpen them right up. So we'll just push this sharpening here by the amount. We'll push it right up here to the end, and you can see that's very over sharpened through here. So we'll back that off. I'll put it to around about, that looks pretty good. Around about 36. 36 for portraits is usually, 35, 36 is a pretty good amount. Next slide along is your radius. Your radius is basically the distance to the edge that you want sharpened. I usually leave this around a preset of 1, so that's pretty simple there, 1, that looks pretty good. Next one along is your detail slider. In portraits, you don't really want to go over the top with details, so I'd leave this at the preset of 25. If you're shooting landscapes, where you really want to see all the details in the shot, I'd move this up to around about sort of 45 or something like that. But I'm going to keep this at the preset of 25, so I'll double click there, and there we go, back to the preset of 25. Now the next one along is a really ingenious slider. It's called masking, and what this does, it actually masks through on the face, and it masks the areas that you don't want to actually sharpen. For example, the skin on the face through here, where it does actually sharpen through on the mouth and the nose and the eyes. So what I'll do, I'll hover on the masking here and I'll click on the Alt key, and as I hold that down, you can start to see the areas through here that it's masking off by the black. So if you see as I'm pushing this along further and further, you can see that the skin there is completely masked off, where the sharpening is through on the eyes and the nose and the mouth and around the hair and further and further. So I'm going to just bring that back here to around about 65. That's looking pretty good. So what that's done, it's masked off the face, as you can see there, and only applied sharpening to around the eyes, the mouth and the nose. So there we go. The way to sharpen your photos is from top to bottom. Choose your amount, then your radius, then the amount of details that you want, and then you mask it off. So that looks pretty nice. Pretty sharpened photo. Great. So if you found everything that I've just gone through in RAW to be all a little bit too much, there are a couple of different steps for you. There's an auto function in Camera Raw. You just come along here and you click auto, and it's generally pretty good. I mean, that looks pretty nice. If you don't like how it looks, come back here to default, and that will show you the default settings. So there you go, auto, or if you don't like it, back on default settings. And also, if you've had a look on your camera, if you're shooting, for example, a picture style as portrait, and you like what you see and you think, well, why can't my JPEG come out if I'm shooting in RAW? You've actually got this. On the back here you'll see a little camera icon, so you click on that camera icon like that, and here are your profiles straight out of your camera. You've got Camera Portrait, or Adobe Standard, or Camera Faithful, or Landscape. Let's just try that. We'll just move to Standard. Let's move around to Portrait. And that's exactly how your camera will spit out a JPEG. So you've got your camera profiles or your auto settings. So once you have your image into Photoshop Elements, you want to start to manipulate it. Now usually, there'll only be certain parts of the image that you want to manipulate. For example, in this shot, I want to make the sky bluer. So let's have a look at your selection tools on how you can use them. Now, you've got a couple of selection tools here. You've got your rectangular marquee tool, which is not going to be very good for the sky, but it's very good for squares and straight edges. So you can see the selection there. Or you've also got your elliptic marquee tool, which is great for circles. Good for this ball. There we go. Let's put it over the ball here. I'll delete there. You can see your selection through here. You've also got your lasso tool, like a lasso in the Wild West. You put your lasso around the person and you've selected them. There we go. Delete that. You've also got an enhanced version, which is the magnetic lasso tool, where it actually does the work for you. You click around and it finds the edge and traces around the person to the edge. You can see it there, tracing the edge. It's great, this tool. Really good, especially for cutting out people. Next one along is a polygon lasso tool. This is great for building shapes on the edges of buildings. You click through along there, press your mouse key, click again, up there, and there you go. Next one along is your magic wand tool. Now let's try to use our magic wand tool to select the sky. So I'll just do a click through here. Now the tolerance level is pretty high. You can reduce and increase the tolerance level, which will increase or decrease the amount of sky that will bring in, or the tolerance to the actual image. So I'm just going to bring that down to 10. I'll show you again. Reducing it to 10 only selects a certain part of it. And to increase that, you can just increase it here. Let's put it at 30 here. I'll just show you what we got. There we go. Selects a much larger part. Now to add to the selection, you can just use your shift key. So I'll press my shift key down and you can see it's starting to add to the selection through here. And to reduce from the selection, say for example you've got a little bit too much here on the green or through here, you just press your Alt key and you click again. You can see it coming out. I find the magic wand tool a little bit hit and miss, and I prefer to use the next tool along, which is called the quick selection tool. Now the quick selection tool is almost like a paintbrush. You can increase or decrease the size of your paintbrush through here. I'll just keep it around about here and I start to paint the sky, and you can see I'm just painting along here in the sky, and look at that. It's looking great. I've selected almost all the sky there in a matter of seconds. The other tool you can use as well is a selection brush tool, and you can actually paint in your selection. I'll just do that. The computer doesn't finish it off for you. It's all down to you. Then you'll have to bring it down a little bit here, smaller brush, and paint through these areas as well. So there we are, 4 or 5 different ways to make selections on your photograph, and you have to choose the different method for the different shape you're using at the time. One question I get asked constantly is about our layers and what we need to use them for. The easy explanation is this. We use layers to protect our original photograph and also to make fine-tune adjustments on it. I'll show you an example. I'm going to come through here and draw a moustache here. Now I'm drawing a moustache on the original photograph, so I'm changing the pixels of the original photograph. We don't want to do that. We always want to be working in a non-destructing environment. So I'll just undo that. And I'm going to create a protective layer. So I come down here to add or create new layer. So I'll create new layer. There's our new layer here, layer 1. I'm going to go back and do exactly the same thing and draw on a little moustache. There we go. Now I've drawn the moustache on the new layer. The original photograph is intact. I'll just turn off this little eye and you can see it there, turning off and on. Now the beauty of that is you can actually move this around. Move this across over to here. There we go. You can change the opacity level of that, so you can turn it down. You can vary the intensity there, so you can fine tune it through there. And you haven't touched the original photograph, which is very important. Now if you're going to start to make adjustments onto your photograph, for example, I wanted to brighten this photograph a little bit, so I click down here on create new fill or adjustment layer. I'm going to click here and I'm going to change my brightness and contrast. I've added here a new adjustment layer over the top of the original, so I'll just brighten that a little bit through here. There we go. And if you look through here, there's our brightness contrast adjustment level. There's our original level, and we've gone straight over the top. You can add unlimited amounts of adjustments here, which means that you can really start to fine tune your photograph. I'll just add another level here. I'm going to add the hue saturation. Change our hue a little bit through here. Back to our adjustment, and see, there we are, there's our hue saturation level. So we've got our original photograph and we've got 3 different layers on top. So that's why we need the layers. We use them to protect our original photograph, and we can also use it to fine tune our adjustments on our photograph. For those of you who want a quick and easy way to do things, Photoshop has provided that for you. All you need to do is come up here and you click on Quick, and here you've got your Quick Fix or your Smart Fix. You come through here, grab your lever and you push it along to however you think is right. I'm going to push it all the way up, and that's looking pretty good. That's a pretty good improvement on the original already. It's taken out all the shadows and you can see the shot very well. I'm just going to cancel out of that. The second way to use that, what a difference that made, is to use your levels going down here. And it's exactly the same way that you did with the raw, is you move your way down. So you start off here with the shadows, slide the shadows, there we go. Midtones, I'm going to increase the midtones a little bit there. Your highlights, there we go, push that up. Saturation, I'm pretty good with the saturation. I'll just add a little bit of saturation just so it doesn't look too fake. There we go, that looks pretty good. Hue, I'm going to leave the hue the same. The temperature, exactly the same as we had the temperature on our raw files. If you move it to the left, you increase your blue, or if you move to the right, you increase your red. I don't touch the one at the bottom here, so I think I've got a little bit too much red in there, so I'm just going to cut that out a little bit there. There we go, that looks pretty good. And the last thing we do is to sharpen up the photo. So I'll just increase my sharpness a little bit through here. That looks pretty good. And that's a pretty good improvement in about a minute time. So that's a pretty quick, easy way to do things. So you've got two ways to do it. You've got your quick fix or your smart fix, or you can use your levels through here. So that's a quick and easy way to do it. Photoshop Elements have made a quick and easy way to get rid of red eye out of your shot. So let's zoom in and have a look at the red eye. There we go. Pretty easy to do. Come across here, just click on your red eye removal tool, hover over the pupil, one click, there we go, remove from there. On the right hand side, one click, and we've completely removed the red eye in under a minute. Excellent. The trick to getting a good portrait is to having really nice teeth. And how can we do it without having to spend all that money of going to a dentist? Well, it's a pretty easy way to do it. Let's zoom in on the teeth here. Okay. There we go. First thing we need to select it. So there's a number of different ways to select, as we know, but I find that one of the easiest ones to use on teeth is a magic wand tool. So look at that, just go through and you press your shift button and you just keep adding to your selection until you get all the teeth that you want. Just get a little bit through here. It's a bit time consuming, but it's pretty quick. Under a minute and you've got everything done. There we go, it's looking pretty good. A couple little pieces down here. Looking pretty good. One little part at the top here. Okay, that's great. Now I've got our selection. Now we want to make an adjustment, and I want to make an adjustment layer here so we don't touch the original. So I'm going to click on here on adjustment layer, and I'm going to go to hue saturation. So I'm making an adjustment layer on the hue saturation. Now the trick to doing this is to not whiten all the colors, but what you want to do is to actually just lose the yellow out of the actual teeth. So instead of choosing all the colors, just come down here to master and then choose yellow. And then what you want to do to get rid of the yellow is you want to desaturate it. So you start to desaturate through here. You can start to see the yellow coming out of the teeth. Now you want to make sure it's looking natural and not looking a little bit over the top. That there is starting to go a little bit blue. It's losing so much color. So we'll just bring that back in a little bit like that. There we go. That looks good. Next thing you want to do is to actually lighten the teeth a little bit as well. So we'll just lighten a tad. Remember, we want to try and look natural as well. So that's looking pretty good. We come back up here to layers. There's our adjustment layer. Now I'm going to turn that off so we can see. Look at the difference. That's what it was like originally. And that's with our new layer. So they're looking pretty good. See, the yellow's gone out of it. That's all we've done. We've just taken the yellow out, but that makes the teeth look really nice and white. So let's have a quick look at how they're looking here. That's looking pretty good. A really nice smile. That's great. Looks like a really nice job. Photoshop Elements has got built in another way to whiten teeth using its smart brush. So let's have a look and see how it works. So I'll just zoom in here on our teeth. Okay, looking good. So we come over here and choose our smart brush. Now they've got a couple of different settings. If you look in your portrait setting, we go for the pearly whites or the very pearly whites. I'd like to have something looking reasonably normal, so we're going to go for pearly whites here. The teeth aren't that bad anyway. There we go, got our pearly white selected. Now we select on the teeth here. Not much else we need to do. We don't need to add or subtract. It all does it all for us. Looking good there. We can change the size of our brush by just here. 25 seemed to work okay. I'm just going to add a little bit more there. Tad through here. That's looking pretty good. So there's our very pearly whites. I'm going to turn them off and on. So it's originally like this, and that's our pearly whites. I think they still might be a little bit too white, so I'm going to use the opacity level here on our layer, which is another great way to fine tune. So I'm just going to bring that down a little bit, around about there, around about 30%. That's looking good. So let's just check that out. Yep, that's looking very good. So let's zoom out here and see the change it's made. I'll just deselect that so I can see a bit easier. And that's looking pretty good. So if you want to do it quickly, that's a pretty quick way to do it from using the Smart Brush. So let's look at how we can use the healing tool to remove any imperfections in the skin. So first thing we want to do is to duplicate our background layer just so we don't wreck our original layer. So we do Control J or Command J and we duplicate the layer. So there we go, we're working on the duplicate layer here. We come across here and we choose our Spot Healing Brush tool, and let's go through, and I'll just change the size of that brush down a little bit, and we just click on. Just click straight or hover straight over the top of the spot you want to heal and click the healing button. Let's get rid of some of these around here, a little bit through here and there. Okay, and that's looking pretty good. A couple of extra spots and there. Okay, let's look one more over here. So let's look at the before and after. So before, look at all the spots and imperfections, and after. That's looking pretty good there. Now if you've got a larger part, for example under the eye here, which you want to heal, you just want to take the sort of the bags out of the eyes here. You change over and you choose your healing brush tool. What you need to do with this one is you need to select a section of the skin you want to sample. So I'm going to sample this section here just under the eye. So you use your Alt key and you click, and then you come through here and just on the section you want to heal, let go, and look at that. Presto, it's looking great. Let's have a look at the before and after there. Before and after, all looking pretty clean and very smooth. So that's how you use your healing brush tool to remove any imperfections from the skin. So whenever you open a magazine, you see these pictures of these celebrities looking absolutely flawless. Their skin looks perfect. How do they get such perfect skin? Well, it's usually through Photoshop and a process called airbrushing. Let's have a quick look at how to do it. So first thing you want to do is duplicate your background, as you don't want to wreck your original photo. And then you come across here and you choose a section on the skin. I'm going to choose, well, let's start at the top. We use a forehead here. We press OK. Come across, choose a brush, your brush tool, and get a nice soft brush through here and get your opacity around about 20-25%. So 25%, great. And a wider brush as possible because it would look more natural, and brush away. There you go. The trick to doing this is to always keep resampling the sections on the face. So I'm going to resample through here, and as you can see it was a pretty different color again. So if you'd use the part from the top of the forehead, it would have looked a bit strange. So we're looking at that, that looks pretty good, pretty smoothed out through here. And now as we move around to a different section of the face, I'm going to resample over here again, and you'll see it is a fairly bit different there. So we'll do OK through here, and I'll just bring that down through here. I'm going to resample again for this section here, and that's looking pretty good. And bigger brush as possible because you want it to look as natural as possible, and just smooth through here. There we go. That's taken me about a minute to airbrush the entire face, and let's have a look at the before and after. So before looks pretty imperfect, and after, perfect skin. Look at that. We've done a facial in under a minute and it was for free. Perfect. So in our quest for the perfect portrait, let's have a look at what we can do about accentuating the eyes and also around the eyes, meaning the eyebrows and the eyelashes. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to zoom in and just zoom in here on our section of the eyes. There we go, looking pretty good. Just back off a little bit there. Okay, so first thing we want to do is to duplicate our layer. So we'll do Control J or Command J so we don't wreck our original layer, and we come across here and we choose our Magic Wand tool. So I'm going to choose the whites of the eyes first of all. So I'm using the Magic Wand tool and also the Shift key. So I'm going to be adding to the selection. And we just select the whites through here. We can use our Alt key if we choose too much. So we just get rid of these parts through here. There we go. And there. And back changing to the Shift again to add to the selection. And that little part in the corner there as well. Now we're going to move down and we're going to make an adjustment layer. So adjustment layer on our hue saturation. And what we want to do with those whites is we just want to desaturate it. Take the color out just to make it a little bit whiter. So we're just desaturating the whole lot, not too much, just a little bit through there. And we're going to lighten them as well. So we lighten them around about, I'm just going to use about 10% here. We don't want to make it looking too fake. We've already got it looking pretty good there already, and it's believable. That's the number one thing, is you don't want it looking too artificial. So we come back to our layers, we choose the layer, which is our original layer. Then we're going to move over here and we're going to choose our dodge tool. So we choose dodge tool here. Come up here, make sure you're set to midtones and your exposure around about 10%. So we're around about 10%, and we're just going to lighten through. So we're around about 10%, and we're just going to come through and lighten the eyes. So we're just coming through here, and we're just doing it gradually through there, and on this side as well, just lightening the eyes. So they're looking pretty good. So let's have a quick look at the before and after that. So just subtle changes there, but they really do make a difference when you start to combine all these things together. So that's looking pretty good. Now next thing we want to do is move back across again and choose your burn tool. So we choose the burn tool here. The burn tool is exactly the opposite. Instead of lightening, it actually darkens. So I'll just increase the size of my brush a little bit here, and let's get to work on these eyebrows. So look at that. See, we're darkening the eyebrows there, starting to emphasize the eyebrows, and this side as well. Applying a bit of digital makeup really here. There we go. That looks pretty good. So darker. Now let's put some mascara, a little bit more mascara than we've got here, around the eyes. So we'll just a little bit of mascara around the eyelashes. That's looking pretty good. And a little bit here on these eyelashes through here as well. That's looking good. Excellent. That looks great. So pretty simple. We've gone around the eyebrows, the eyelashes, we lighten the eyes, and let's have a bit of a look. Before and after. Let's zoom out so we can just see a little bit before and after. So there we go. That's before and that's after. It's believable and it looks great, and it's a really good way to just put the finishing touches on a portrait. Okay, let's look at how we can reduce noise in our photographs. Now, this example here is probably as bad as you're ever going to get. This was a shot we took from our photography course where we, on purpose, used a very high ISO in the middle of the day to get a lot of grain in the photograph. Now, if you look at it there, you probably can't notice it that much. But if I zoom in here to 100%, it looks like we've put some sort of filter on her, or put a fly screen in front of her face, and and thrown some dirt at it or something. It looks absolutely terrible. So how are we actually going to bring back a photograph as bad as this to something that we can actually use? First thing we do is we move down here to the luminance slider, which I could almost call a joining the dots slider, because that's what it does. You can see it starting to reduce the dots in the face and bring it together, but it does make your photograph quite soft. So that's not looking too bad. But we've also got all these different colors coming through the photograph as well. So we use underneath that the color slider to get rid of those. So we just increase the color slider, and you can see it gradually getting rid of these colors through here. There we go. That's looking not too bad. Compared to what it was, it's 100% better. So let's zoom out and have a look what we've got here. That's looking pretty good. If you printed that photo out like that, it would become a pretty nice photo actually. So from what we started off with a terrible photo, we've actually got something reasonably nice. So there you go, that's how you use your noise reduction. Start off with the illuminate slider, and then if you've got some colored artifacts through there, you push your color slider along as well. I'll just show you what we started with. So I'll just bring that back here and back here again. And that is absolutely terrible. Look at that. Shocking. Too easy. There we go. Bring up your illuminate slider and get rid of the color artifacts. There we go. Looking good.